Dune by Frank Herbert. Caladan, a world abundant in water and vegetation, is the home planet of House Atreides, who begin their preparations to leave for the notorious desert planet Arrakis. Duke Leto is the ruler of the Atreides, sharing an unmarried relationship with Lady Jessica, a Bene Gesserit sister. This is a secretive and powerful order of women, very influential in the complex web of political, religious, and genetic manipulation. They are not married, leaving Leto open for a possible political marriage, but they love each other, and together they have a 15-year-old son, Paul Atreides. One evening, an old woman who is later revealed as Reverend Mother Mohiam arrives at their castle on Caladan. Accompanied by Lady Jessica, her former student at the Bene Gesserit school, they observe Paul in his room as he pretends to be sleeping. They whisper about the prophecy of the Kwisatz Haderach, wondering if Paul may indeed be the one. So the Reverend Mother decides that he will soon be tested with the Gom Jabbar. Paul hears the two women talk about the prophecy, leaving him puzzled by the significance of those words. After they leave, he is quite annoyed by the way this strange woman treats his mother, more like a servant rather than the Duke's concubine. As he sits in bed, he contemplates the changes revolving around the move away from Caladan. He remembers his discussion with Thufir Hawat, Duke Leto's master of assassins, and Mentat, an individual with exceptional computing abilities. House Harkonnen, their old rivals, has ruled Arrakis for 80 years under an imperial contract, harvesting the extremely valuable spice melange. The Emperor Shaddam IV has decided to withdraw the Harkonnens from Dune and award the control of the planet to Duke Leto, raising suspicions of a potential political scheme. Falling asleep, his thoughts are consumed by Arrakis, dreaming about a dimly illuminated cavern reminiscent of a cathedral with faint echoes of dripping water. He senses that this dream, like many others, holds prophetic significance destined to linger in his memory. Waking up in the early morning hours, he reflects on his lessons from Dr. Yue about the desert planet. It operates on a feudal system, with the Fremen living in the outskirts of the desert beyond imperial control. These thoughts make him anxious, so he employs a Bene Gesserit technique learned from his mother to calm things down. Lady Jessica enters his room, looking quite nervous. She tells him that the Reverend Mother wants to meet him, and he recalls dreaming about her in the past. She urges him to share his dreams with her former teacher and to get dressed faster. When they finally meet Mohiam, Jessica is asked to leave the chamber, prompting Paul to become enraged by the apparent disrespect towards his mother, but the Reverend Mother remains unfazed. To assess his humanity, she places at his neck the Gom Jabbar, a poison needle, threatening him with death if he fails to control his instincts while enduring extreme pain from a nerve-inducing box. Initially, he becomes furious but submits to the test when he finds out that his mother agreed to this. As he starts to endure the worst pain he has ever felt, Mohiam observes his courage and mental strength, exceeding any previous lengths of this test. Despite expecting his hand to be burned to ashes after this intense trial, he is surprised to see that he is unharmed. Following this, they discuss the test, and the Reverend Mother is amazed to discover that Paul has the ability to detect when others tell the truth. Lady Jessica enters the room feeling immense relief that Paul has completed the trial, as she had to endure the same pain during her Bene Gesserit training. Mohiam starts to elaborate on the breeding program aimed at creating the prophesied Kwisatz Haderach. It will be a male possessing extraordinary mental and physical abilities beyond those of ordinary humans. This individual is said to have the power to bridge space and time, to perceive and manipulate reality in ways that defy conventional understanding. He will be the first to take the Truth's Heir drug without dying like all previous males who have tried. This drug grants access to Bene Gesserit's ancestral memories and has been successfully used by many women in their trial of becoming a reverend mother. However, only a male is capable of accessing both masculine and feminine ancestral paths. Meanwhile, on another planet, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen brags to his mentat Piter and his ruthless 16-year-old nephew and heir, Phaedrotha, about the trap he has arranged for the Atreides on Arrakis. He is a prideful and obese man, relying on anti-gravity technology to support his massive weight. The Baron reveals how he has convinced the Emperor to appoint Duke Leto as the new leader of Arrakis. This seems like a favorable position due to the planet's spice production being extremely valuable and also the only place in the known universe to be found. However, the plan is for Leto and his family to meet their demise upon arrival. He has manipulated a trusted member of House Atreides to betray them. In his arrogance, he insists that the Duke must know who orchestrated his downfall before his demise, as he also wants the other great houses to fear him. In response to this bold scheme, Piter worries that the Emperor might see this success as a threat, but the Baron dismisses this concern. The mentat goes on to remind him that he was promised Lady Jessica for helping in the downfall of the Atreides, to which the Baron starts hurling insults at him, highlighting his addiction to melange. Piter wonders if he should fear for his life, as he could be easily replaced by another mentat, but Baron Harkonnen doubts he could find someone as talented as him. Following this conversation, they start going through their plans to dismantle House Atreides. The key element involves turning Dr. Yue into a traitor. This is particularly surprising given that those with imperial conditioning are typically regarded as highly trustworthy. The plan also involves framing Lady Jessica as the traitor. Additionally, the Baron enlists the Emperor's fearsome Sardaukar troops, disguised as Harkonnen soldiers, to attack the Atreides on the capital city of Arrakis. The Emperor's support stems from his fear of Duke Leto's rising influence among the great houses, seeing this as a great opportunity to get rid of a rival. On the evening following Paul Atreides' Gom Jabbar test, Reverend Mother Mohiam confronts Jessica for bearing a son instead of a daughter, as instructed by the Bene Gesserit. Women who are part of the sisterhood have the ability to choose the sex of the child before birth, and she decided to have a son because Duke Leto wanted nothing more. This decision disrupts the Bene Gesserit's breeding plan, which aimed to marry her daughter to Phaedrotha Harkonnen, potentially creating the prophesized Kwisatz Haderach, but Jessica stands firm in her choice, despite its consequences. The Reverend Mother cautions her about the imminent danger the Atreides will face on Arrakis, highlighting the political scheme orchestrated by the Emperor and House Harkonnen. She predicts Duke Leto's demise on Dune, with Jessica and her son Paul becoming outcasts. Torn between anger and sorrow, Jessica accepts that she has no power to change the course of events, bound to serve the sisterhood forward. Following this, Mohiam summons Paul again to discuss his prophetic dreams. He describes encountering a mysterious girl with blue eyes who calls him Usul, and when she asks him about the waters of his native planet Caladan, he answers her with a poem. Paul is firmly convinced that he'll meet this girl in the future. After hearing this, despite her doubts, the Reverend Mother acknowledges the possibility of Paul being the one, the Kwisatz Haderach. She gives him some insights on controlling the Truth's Heir drug, making Paul feel burdened by a significant sense of purpose. He reveals that he overheard the discussion about his father's imminent death, leaving him angered by the Bene Gesserit's refusal to help them. Before leaving, Mohiam tells Jessica to continue Paul's training in the way of the Bene Gesserit, including his technique of the voice. She wishes Paul good luck in the events to come, and as she prepares to depart Caladan, Jessica notices tears in her eyes, leaving her unsettled. A week after the Reverend Mother's visit, Thufir Hawat, the mentat who has been an advisor for the Atreides for 3 generations, meets with Paul in the training room. They discuss the harsh climate of Arrakis and the importance of gaining the respect of the Fremen, crucial in their success of ruling and harvesting the spice. They are very tough and resilient due to the challenges imposed by the desert, so having them as friends is better than having them as enemies. When they begin to talk about the stillsuits and the water scarcity on Dune, Paul remembers a dream he once had where he was extremely thirsty. At the end of the lesson, Paul shares with Hawat some insights gained during his conversation with Reverend Mother Mohiam. She emphasized the importance of mastering the art of becoming a true leader, and according to her, the key element is to learn how to persuade people rather than coerce them. The Mentat agrees with the Reverend Mother's wisdom, and he bids farewell to Paul, planning to embark for Dune later that day while the rest of them will set off the next day. Shortly after, the Master of Arms for the Atreides and one of Paul's most beloved figures joins him in the training room. Aside from his prowess in combat, Halleck is known for his proficiency in playing the basilet, a musical instrument with strings. He begins to sing a naughty song after engaging in some friendly banter with the young Duke. After the jokes are over, things start to get serious with the two of them engaging in a duel. The Master of Arms poses a formidable challenge, with the intensity of the fight being so high that it even sparks fear in Paul, who suspects that Halleck might be aiming to inflict serious harm. However, this aggression stems from a desire to underscore the importance of proficient combat skills, especially considering the impending dangers of Arrakis. He advises Paul to view their training sessions as crucial for his survival in the uncertain future. Following this duel, Paul begins to reflect on the necessity of adapting to the new circumstances. Halleck, on the other hand, is pleasantly surprised to discover that Paul has independently delved into some new martial techniques beyond the teachings of both himself and Swordmaster Duncan Idaho. Later on the same day, Paul also has a meeting in the training room with Dr. Yue, from whom he learns fresh insights about Arrakis. Yue confirms that the Fremen are formidable fighters, renowned for their distinctive blue eyes due to spice consumption. Paul admires their fierce culture, where even children become violent and dangerous at a very young age, seeing them as a great potential ally to have on your side. He also learns about the massive sandworms, dominating the desert territory and reaching lengths exceeding 400 meters. They should seek guidance from Dr. Kynes, the imperial planetologist, for further insights into the planet's ecology. During their discussion, Yue contemplates his betrayal of House Atreides, and despite his inner conflict and remorse, he remains resolute, believing that his actions are necessary to protect his wife from the cruelty of the Harkonnens. As he prepares to leave the room, he gifts Paul an orange Catholic Bible the size of a thumbnail, a tiny yet dense book spanning 1,800 pages. It is readable using magnification technology, and it contains a vast array of religious teachings from across the universe. He hopes to introduce the young Duke to spirituality before his potential demise, easing the doctor's conscience. Paul is encouraged to read a passage from the Bible aloud, but Yue interrupts upon realizing that this is his wife's cherished passage, finding it hard to grapple with guilt over his impending betrayal. Before departing, he also urges Paul not to disclose the gift to Lady Jessica, aware that she would question the motives. Before nightfall, Paul has a meeting with his father, who confirms their departure the following day. Duke Leto has a serious talk with his son, being aware of the danger awaiting them on Dune, but remains optimistic about their ability to survive. He knows about the Harkonnen trap, and he emphasizes the strategic importance of the spice melange. Leto thinks they are plotting to disrupt the harvesting operations, leading to spice shortages, and ultimately, he will be the one to blame for this. The Harkonnens have already stockpiled huge quantities of spice, allowing them to skyrocket the prices when the shortage happens. He also thinks that the Emperor might be part of this scheme, making things even worse. That is why Duke Leto cannot emphasize enough the importance of gaining the support of the Fremen. Additionally, he reveals to his son that he has been secretly trained as a mentat since he was very young, a skill Paul is eager to pursue further. The next day, the rest of the Atreides arrive on Arrakis, making their way into their new home in Arrakeen, the capital city. Lady Jessica, standing next to the stacks of boxes housing their belongings, casts a gaze across her new home, reflecting on her emotions stirred by this move. Duke Leto joins her, engaging in a conversation on how to make their new surroundings feel welcoming. He admires Jessica's striking beauty, wondering about her mysterious ancestry as the Bene Gesserit keep their lineage secret. Leto assures her of the security arrangements. He has also employed several Fremen servants, among whom is Shadow Mapes, appointed as Jessica's chief housekeeper. He discloses the existence of tales circulating within the Fremen community regarding the Bene Gesserit, but she attributes the legends to Missionaria Protectiva. This is a strategy employed by the Sisterhood to spread prophecies among various societies across the galaxy, potentially serving the Bene Gesserit's interests in times of necessity. After Duke Leto departs, Jessica remains alone, as Shadow Mapes comes in to make her acquaintance. Employing her keen powers of observation and deduction, along with insights from the embedded myths of the Bene Gesserit, Jessica swiftly foresees Mapes' intention to kill her with a concealed weapon. The Fremen woman steps forward and surrenders a blade, which Lady Jessica correctly identifies as both a crysknife and a maker. Viewing this as the fulfillment of the prophecy, the arrival of a Bene Gesserit and her son on Arrakis, Mapes calls Jessica the Chosen One and gives her the weapon. In her quest to find her son, Lady Jessica stumbles upon Yui in one of the chambers, with Paul asleep in the adjacent room. Their conversation delves into the intricacies of the Arrakis situation, particularly regarding the reception of the Fremen towards the new ruling house of the planet. They both acknowledge the probability of resentment among the populace towards the Atreides given their newfound lucrative venture in spice production. However, there's a glimmer of hope that some may perceive the Atreides as more benevolent compared to the oppressive Harkonnens who previously held power. They also exchange thoughts on the scarcity of water on Arrakis and the looming threat of a future Harkonnen assault. Yui grapples with profound remorse over the impending betrayal, and despite his deep affection for the Atreides family, the manipulative schemes of Baron Harkonnen have coerced him into this treacherous path. Jessica uncovers the heartbreaking truth about his wife, also a member of the Bene Gesserit, who was kidnapped and presumably perished at the hands of House Harkonnen. He entertains the possibility that his wife may still be alive, trying to conceal his deceitful intentions from Jessica, but she cannot shake off a sense of unease, sensing that he is holding something back, but she chooses not to confront him, placing her trust in the allies of House Atreides. Meanwhile, Paul is just pretending to be asleep, eavesdropping on his mother's conversation with Dr. Yui in the next room. As the two finish their interaction and leave, Paul gets out of bed, only to stop abruptly as he detects a hunter-seeker, a motion-tracking lethal weapon, emerging stealthily from the headboard of his bed. The device makes an attempt on his life, narrowly missing its mark, and it targets the Fremen housekeeper Shadow Mapes when she enters Paul's room to deliver a message from Duke Leto. Employing his understanding of hunter-seekers, Paul skillfully neutralizes it, saving her life. In gratitude, Mapes repays him by disclosing the Fremen's suspicions of a traitor within House Atreides. Following her discussion with Yui, Jessica finds a secret greenhouse within the palace. This hidden sanctuary teems with greenery including roses and other flowers, evidently demanding huge amounts of water daily to be sustained. Here, she finds a message for her from Lady Margot Fenring, a fellow member of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood and the wife of Count Fenring. Cryptically, she forewarns Jessica of an imminent attempt on Paul's life, along with the looming specter of betrayal within House Atreides involving a trusted confidant. As she prepares to leave, Paul bursts into the greenhouse holding the hunter-seeker, urgently disclosing both the recent assault and the cautionary words of Shadow Mapes regarding a potential traitor. Jessica tells him to immerse the device into the water of the fountain to deactivate it, and next a guard comes in, reporting the capture and subsequent demise of the individual manipulating the hunter-seeker from within the palace cellar. She then passes on the warnings from Lady Fenring, prompting them to speculate on the identity of the potential traitor. When they prepare to depart, she sees flashes of light emanating from the distant desert cliffs, suspecting them to be secret signals exchanged among Harkonnen agents. Duke Leto finds himself deeply unsettled upon finding out that the Harkonnens have orchestrated a plot against his son's life. From his vantage point, atop a tower overlooking the Arrakeen landing zone, he reflects on this situation. Aware of the pivotal importance of securing the support of the Fremen for the incoming conflict, he finds himself fixating on the harrowing realization that the Harkonnens are already trying to go after Paul. In the assembly room of the tower, Leto meets with several of his men to make security plans. He entrusts Gurney Halleck with the responsibility of sending Thufir Hawat additional manpower to wipe out the Harkonnen agents across Arrakis. He also instructs him to convince at least some of the 800 spice hunters who are about to depart Arrakis to stay and pledge their service to House Atreides. As Gurney Halleck leaves, Leto makes his way to a private area to allow himself a moment of relaxation, as he needs to show strength and confidence in front of his men at all time. Paul is also summoned to the command center, and before the staff meeting begins, he talks with his father about the hunter-seeker used in the assassination attempt. Duke Leto expresses his disappointment in his mentat for not uncovering the scheme during his security assessment of the palace before the family's arrival. Paul defends him, crediting his mentor's training for enabling him to outmaneuver the hunter-seeker. Understanding that Hawat is probably his own toughest critic, Leto refrains from adding further criticism, acknowledging it wasn't his fault. When the mentat arrives and offers his resignation over his perceived failure, Leto declines it and summons the staff officers inside to start the meeting. They exchange crucial intelligence and strategize against the impending attack. The plans are not all defensive, as they also devise tactics to launch a raid on the Harkonnen spice reserves, located on a different planet. Hawat shares insights into what he has learned about the Fremen, revealing that they are led by someone named Liet. Duke Leto maintains his conviction that House Atreides must forge an alliance with the Fremen, crucial in countering threats from the Harkonnens and potentially the Emperor. So far, the Fremen respond favorably to the Atreides' gestures of friendship, offering valuable gifts like stillsuits and maps. Also, House Atreides is actively seeking an alliance with the spice smugglers. Securing the alliance of the Fremen and the smugglers would not only enhance Leto's financial gains, but also fortify his defensive capabilities. The great houses are reluctant to intervene in the escalating conflict between the Atreides and the Harkonnens, even though they have once pledged support to Duke Leto. It is common for them to maintain distance until a clear winner emerges before taking sides. There are several concerns surrounding the production of spice. Its progress is currently hindered by the Harkonnens, who left the Atreides with malfunctioning equipment. Additionally, the presence of sandworms poses a significant threat to the successful extraction of spice from the desert, as they can swallow the entire spice harvester. They contemplate accelerating spice profits by lowering the wages for workers, including the Fremen, but Leto rejects this notion, prioritizing the long-term prosperity of Arrakis. Next, the discussion delves into the idea of Emperor Shaddam IV backing the Harkonnens' assault on House Atreides, possibly camouflaging his formidable Imperial Sardaukar troops under the Harkonnen banner. The Duke emphasizes the necessity of securing Fremen warriors to counter the Sardaukar threat, and he is pleased to hear from Gurney Halleck that he has convinced nearly 300 spice hunters to remain and serve House Atreides. Meanwhile, Duncan Idaho arrives and joins the meeting, recounting an encounter with Harkonnen soldiers posing as local Fremen. Despite the Fremen's attempt to alert Duke Leto to this deceit, the messenger was intercepted and slain by the enemy. Idaho describes an unusual weapon found on the messenger, but as he prepares to reveal the weapon to the gathering, Stilgar, a commanding Fremen leader, calls out from the doorway, preventing the display of the crysknife. Stilgar's presence is immediately felt by Paul upon his entrance, emitting an unmistakable sense of authority. The Fremen clarifies that those who have seen a crysknife are bound to Arrakis indefinitely, with Duke Leto agreeing to this tradition out of respect. Stilgar's gesture of respect towards the Duke involves spitting, which initially alarms Leto's men. However, Idaho intervenes swiftly to avert any potential conflict, elucidating that spitting signifies reverence among the Fremen, symbolizing the sacrifice of the precious water. In a bid to fortify ties between House Atreides and the Fremen, Stilgar proposes that Idaho join his siege. They embrace this proposal, forging a new alliance where Idaho serves both as an Atreides soldier and a Fremen ambassador. Duke Leto concludes the gathering by issuing an order to locate Dr. Kynes, the Imperial planetologist, to have him guide the Atreides to the Imperial bases on Arrakis. As the meeting adjourns, Paul is troubled by his father's seeming desperation, recalling the ominous prophecy from Reverend Mother Mohayim about Leto's fate. Shortly after the staff meeting, Leto has a private discussion with Hawat in the command headquarters, tasking him with the mission to dismantle the Harkonnen spice reserves located on Giedi Prime. Despite the limited manpower available, the Duke deems this mission extremely valuable and proposes the possibility of involving a few Fremen who might appreciate this off-world expedition. The Mentat shares the intercepted message indicating Lady Jessica's involvement with Baron Harkonnen, unaware of its deceptive nature, but Leto remains steadfast in her loyalty. Nonetheless, he chooses to feign suspicion toward Jessica, aiming to deceive the Harkonnens into believing they've succeeded in their scheme. He also allows his officers to entertain the notion of Jessica's guilt to increase the credibility, with Thufir Hawat placing her under rigorous surveillance. Duke Leto had previously tasked his Mentat with investigating the sudden emergence of Fremen, referring to Paul in the public spaces as Lisan al-Gaib. He reports that they perceive his son as the prophesied messiah of their legends, foretelling the arrival of a leader born of a Bene Gesserit, who would guide them to liberation. Leto finds himself pondering the profound significance of the Fremen's beliefs, taking a moment to contemplate as he strides towards a balcony overlooking the majestic expanse of the desert below. A surge of fury courses through him, thinking about the looming threat of the Harkonnens and the danger it poses to his family and people. In the early hours of the morning, Duke Leto shares a meal with Paul, disclosing the intercepted Harkonnen message by Thufir Hawat. In the event of unforeseen circumstances befalling Leto, Paul is tasked with assuring Jessica of his unwavering trust in her innocence. He outlines his strategy of gaining the Fremen as allies and gives Paul a report on their religious practices. He advises his son to exploit their perception of him as a religious divine figure, a tactic that could ensure his survival in case House Atreides falls. Paul senses an ominous connection between the Fremen's faith and the potential fulfillment of the Bene Gesserit's prophecy regarding his role as the Kwisatz Haderach. Later that morning, Duke Leto and Paul meet with Dr. Kynes, the Imperial planetologist, at the Arrakeen landing site where an ornithopter awaits them. Kynes expresses internal disdain towards House Atreides and mocks their reliance on force shields, his feelings further aggravated by the fact that he was interrogated all night and then briefed on how to handle the nobility. Despite this, he finds himself somewhat impressed by the authority exuded by Paul as he approaches. His confident demeanor in wearing a stillsuit for the first time aligns with the Fremen prophecies of the Mahdi, who is foretold to possess an innate understanding of their customs. He also surprises Kynes and the Fremen escort by quoting a passage from the Orange Catholic Bible, as they anticipate being greeted by their Messiah with sacred words. Soon, Duke Leto, Paul, and Gurney Halleck embark on an ornithopter journey to witness a spice mining operation. Guided by Dr. Kynes, Leto pilots the thopter, and as they fly over the desert, they engage in a conversation about the functionality and production of stillsuits. There's also a tense exchange between the two of them regarding Kynes' position as an Imperial agent. Moreover, the planetologist evades divulging the specifics of his work, deflecting the Duke's inquiries regarding spice. Leto wants access to the old Imperial bases on the planet, but it is clear this is not something Kynes is willing to facilitate. They finally arrive at the location, approaching a huge spice harvester. Kynes warns them to be on their guard for the inevitable incoming of a sandworm. The Duke asks about the nature of those creatures, and Paul realizes from Kynes' answers that there is a specific relationship between the sandworms and spice that the planetologist is trying to hide. Leto's keen eyes catch sight of the phenomenon described by the ecologist as a shifting ripple in the desert sands. Confirming the presence of a sizable worm, Kynes promptly transmits this information through radio to the harvester. There's a spice bonus for the individual who spots the sandworms in those situations, and it is decided that the bonus earned by the Duke to be split among the workers to gain their respect and loyalty. The sandworm swiftly approaches, yet the expected arrival of the carry-all ship, crucial in rescuing the spice workers and the crawler, fails to appear. Prioritizing the safety of his people over the valuable spice cargo, Leto takes action to evacuate the workers from harm's way. Using the available space in the ornithopters, they successfully rescue all the spice workers before the entire harvester is swallowed by the sandworm. Both Paul and his father are taken aback to hear Kynes offering blessings to the Maker as the sandworm consumes the spice cargo. The members of House Atreides are perplexed by the sight of two diminutive silhouettes strolling effortlessly across the sands away from the location where the crawler disappeared. Paul knows that they are Fremen, despite denials from Kynes and the spice mining leader being able to sense their deception. Duke Leto expresses deep anger at the perilous conditions faced by his workers during those operations. He also realizes that the group has probably suffered the loss of 2 lives, as Kynes grimly acknowledges their slim chance of survival. But Paul remains skeptical and becomes convinced of the Fremen's ability to survive the desert. After this event, Dr. Kynes' respect for the noble Duke and his insightful son intensifies, impressed that they value human lives over financial gains. He sees Leto's leadership style as one that would inspire unwavering loyalty and devotion. In the opulent dining hall of the Atreides Palace in Arrakis, preparations are meticulously arranged for a formal feast. Duke Leto surveys the scene, particularly noting the extravagant pots of water on each table. Under the Harkonnen regime, it was customary for guests to carelessly spill water on the floor while washing their hands, and then throw the wet towels near the entrance. Those discarded towels would then become a sought-after commodity for the beggars of Arrakis, hoping to salvage some moisture from them. Duke Leto, repulsed by this tradition, opts for a different path, generously distributing the clean water to the impoverished of the city. This is met with resistance from the elite guests arriving for dinner, but Leto disregards their objections. In the majestic Great Hall, Lady Jessica gracefully hosts the esteemed guests. Paul, Dr. Kynes, and Duncan Idaho are also there, and surprisingly Jessica extends an invitation to Esmar Tuek, a smuggler. Leto is struck by her beauty as she is wearing clothing in his favorite colors, seeing this as a response to his recent behavior towards her, but this is essential in finding the traitor within House Atreides. He finds himself enveloped in a somber mood, haunted by the looming specter of his imminent death, with Paul sharing the same mood. He starts conversing with the guests in the Great Hall, revealing his intention to conduct experiments to transform the climate of Arrakis, with the aim of fostering a more habitable environment. This bold statement is met with skepticism from a water shipper, who raises concerns about the conservation of the sacred greenhouse due to water scarcity. But Lady Jessica intervenes, offering a diplomatic response that underscores House Atreides' commitment to safeguard the conservatory, envisioning a future where the planet can sustain abundant plant life. Surprised that Jessica shares his vision of transforming Arrakis into a paradise, Dr. Kynes asks a cryptic question that catches her off guard, as she recognizes its allusion to the Kwisatz Haderach. She contemplates whether the Bene Gesserit deliberately planted this prophecy on Arrakis, fueling her hope that Paul may indeed fulfill this role. They all move toward the dining area, and Leto asks Jessica about her choice of inviting the smuggler. She emphasizes his significant influence within the smuggling community across Arrakis, believing that his attendance may be quite impactful. She reflects on the utility of smugglers, with their underground networks and ships, which could offer the Atreides a quick escape from Arrakis if needed. Before dinner begins, Duke Leto surprises everyone with a bold statement and instructs Gurney Halleck to entertain the guests with music on his Bali set. Meanwhile, he continues addressing his guests, asking them to emulate his actions by pouring a small amount of water from their glasses onto the ground. The guests show some nervousness to this unconventional request, with Dr. Kynes opting to pour his water into a personal receptacle rather than onto the floor, before raising his glass in a toast. As they all begin eating, a dialogue between Dr. Kynes and a representative from the Spacing Guild is overheard by Jessica. They discuss the recent sandworm incident involving the spice harvester, and shockingly, she realizes that the guild representative's accent is reminiscent of Gidi Prime, indicating he might be a Harkonnen agent. When the guild representative throws an insult, the planetologist issues a menacing warning, revealing a power dynamic that surprises Jessica, who realizes that the guild official fears him. She then engages Dr. Kynes in a conversation regarding the potential transformation of Arrakis, and the Duke notices that this aspiration is what has led the Imperial planetologist to change his attitude towards House Atreides. Leto asks him about the likelihood of climate alteration, prompting Kynes to reveal enough information for Jessica to realize that Arrakis possesses enough water reserves to facilitate its transformation into a hospitable environment. A messenger bursts in with urgent news for Duke Leto, prompting his sudden departure from the dinner table, with Paul taking his place as the host. The guild banker is outwitted by Paul in a conversation, and while the smuggler finds this amusing, Jessica thinks that this might lead to violence. Dr. Kynes discreetly signals the smuggler to intervene, and the tension is diffused as Esmar Tuek proposes a toast. Again, the planetologist is showcasing his influence on Arrakis, making Jessica question his allegiance to Paul, wondering why is he lying about the Fremen practices. Shortly, she receives word from Duke Leto, who notifies her that his troops have uncovered a shipment of Harkonnen lost guns. Those are formidable weapons, and the news fills Jessica with concern that some other shipments might have slipped through the security measures. That night, Lady Jessica is awakened by a drunken Duncan Idaho causing a scene in the Great Hall. She attempts to bring him to his senses with a resolute slap, followed by a steaming cup of coffee, but she realizes that Idaho thinks that she is the Harkonnen agent who is about to betray House Atreides. She is shocked to hear this, recognizing the gravity of this suspicion, which it must also be harbored by Thufir Hawat, so she summons the Mentat. In her chamber, she engages in a discussion with Hawat, trying to convince him of her loyalty towards Leto, while simultaneously probing for any signs that he might actually be the traitor, but she finds none. Throughout their extensive exchange, they delve into the reasons supporting or refuting Jessica's trustworthiness. As the conversation draws to a close, it becomes apparent that neither side has succeeded in swaying the other, leaving Hawat still doubtful regarding her allegiance to Duke Leto. Jessica employs the Bene Gesserit voice on the Mentat, compelling him to sit down and listen to her arguments. She wants to clarify that her allegiance lies with House Atreides, emphasizing that if she were disloyal, she could have exploited her power long ago to harm the Duke. Despite her efforts to rebuild the bond of trust by using the voice on him, she only fueled his growing skepticism regarding her intentions. As she allows him to depart from her quarters, he contemplates the idea of ending her life, yet ultimately opts for a peaceful exit. Within the palace, Duke Leto ponders over a cryptic message delivered by a Fremen, but the messenger has vanished without explaining its meaning. Fatigue weighs heavily upon him as he contemplates the recent events, including a discussion with his mentat, who shared everything that happened between himself and Jessica. Leto holds Duncan Idaho accountable for getting drunk and initiating this series of unfortunate events, but he also recognizes his own failure in not being forthcoming with Jessica. He decides to wake her up and tell her the truth, but as he proceeds through a corridor, a peculiar sound catches his attention. Following the noise, he stumbles upon the lifeless body of the smuggler Esmar Tuek, and next to him lies the Atreides housekeeper Shadout Mapes, her fading breaths attempting to unveil the identity of the traitor. She falls silent, and suddenly, a poisoned dart finds its mark in Leto's arm. In the grip of paralysis, Duke Leto shifts his gaze to see Dr. Yue, who disabled the house generators, leaving the Atreides vulnerable to an assault from the Harkonnens. The doctor discloses his treachery, motivated by a deep-seated desire to avenge his wife's abduction and presumed demise at the hands of House Harkonnen. He then implants a fake tooth filled with poisonous gas, urging Leto to bite down when he's face-to-face with the Baron, thus eliminating him once and for all. Yue experiences a profound mixture of emotions as he enacts his vengeance against House Harkonnen, feeling both immense relief and overwhelming guilt for his betrayal of House Atreides. In exchange for Leto eliminating Baron Harkonnen, he pledges to safeguard Paul and Jessica from the impending assault by staging their deaths. As Leto slips into unconsciousness, he senses Yue removing his ducal signet ring. Upon regaining consciousness in a dimly lit chamber, Jessica realizes she's been drugged and restrained on the floor. Captured by the Harkonnens, she hears the approach of 4 distinct footsteps, and as the door creaks open, she figures out that she is in the palace cellar. She finds herself in the presence of Baron Harkonnen and his mentat, while 2 sentinels stand guard outside the room. As a reward for his role in the downfall of the Atreides, the Baron presents Piter with 2 choices: dominion over Arrakis or getting Jessica as he wanted before. Ultimately, Piter chooses the control of Arrakis, but Jessica detects deception in the Baron's words. She finally understands that Yue is the traitor responsible for delivering the Atreides into the hands of the Harkonnens, and with the revelation that the Emperor has thrown his support in this attack, she grimly acknowledges the likelihood of Duke Leto's demise. Not long after, Paul is brought into the room, and despite appearing to be in a state of unconsciousness, he is secretly awake, strategizing an escape plan for himself and Jessica. They are later transported to the desert on Baron's orders by a pair of Harkonnen soldiers, intending for their remains to be consumed by sandworms. Upon their arrival, Jessica observes another ornithopter landing discreetly at a distance along the shield wall. Unlike Jessica, Paul is not gagged, so he uses the voice to sway one of the guards into unbinding his mother. While the other guard remains impervious to the voice due to deafness, Jessica cunningly turns the one she can control against him. With one guard dead, she diverts the attention of the remaining one, providing Paul with the opportunity to take him down. Searching the ornithopter, they stumble upon a concealed package left by Yue. Inside, they find vital supplies including stillsuits, provisions, and Leto's ducal ring. Abruptly, an ornithopter emerges on the horizon, approaching their location, and they hastily depart from the area. A few hours before, back to Dr. Yue placing the poisoned tooth in the Duke's mouth, the Harkonnen troops are swiftly taking control over Arrakis. Amidst the chaos, a Sardaukar soldier, disguised as a Harkonnen, encounters Yue and conducts a thorough search for Duke Leto's ring. However, the doctor has already taken it and plans to deliver it to Paul. He fabricates a story, concealing the fact that he plans to stash it within the vehicle designated to transport Paul and Jessica into the desert. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, looks with satisfaction over the city as the last Atreides forces get slaughtered by his troops with explosives. Piter approaches him, bearing news of the arrival of the Sardaukar warriors escorting the captive Duke. The Baron contemplates the prize he pledged to his mentat. Still, he conceals his true intentions, as he plans to grant Piter only temporary stewardship over Arrakis, before ultimately installing Phaedrotha as the true ruler. He then summons Dr. Yue, who, despite the promise of being reunited with his kidnapped wife, he is aware that she is gone. The Baron reminds the doctor of their agreement of allowing him to see his wife, so he orders Piter to kill him. The soldiers present the subdued Duke, and as he regains consciousness, finds a glimmer of hope upon hearing that Jessica and Paul have survived and escaped into the desert. The Baron pressures the Duke for their whereabouts, and when he leans down to taunt him, Leto recalls the hidden tooth and bites down, releasing the deadly gas. Duke Leto dies instantly, claiming the lives of all Harkonnen soldiers in the room, including Piter, but the Baron manages to escape alive. Following this, a Sardaukar sentinel insists on seeing the Duke's dead body so he can confirm it to the Emperor. Baron Harkonnen finds himself humiliated by Leto, making him look weak in front of the Emperor and in the eyes of his own men. Furthermore, the loss of his trusted mentat complicates matters, forcing him to re-evaluate his strategies for asserting House Harkonnen's dominance on Arrakis. Running from the relentless pursuit of the ornithopter, Paul and Jessica find themselves in the position to brace for an encounter with the Harkonnen forces, but Paul realizes that the pilot is actually Duncan Idaho, recognizing his flying technique. They quickly get into the thopter and take off, thus evading the threat of the incoming sandworm. Flying over the desert, Idaho explains how he escaped with the assistance of Dr. Yue, and he was entrusted with bringing Paul and Jessica to safety. He leaves them on the desert rocks, taking shelter in a traditional Fremen tent, and he goes back to aid fellow survivors of House Atreides. Despite grappling with feelings of guilt for not actively participating in the defense of their house, Paul recognizes the strategic importance of laying low in the face of imminent danger. Paul and Jessica uncover the final message concealed in their package of provisions, left behind by Yue. Despite betraying Duke Leto, the Doctor orchestrated the escape of crucial members of House Atreides. In his message, he predicts Leto's demise, but assures them that Baron Harkonnen will meet his end as well. He states that he doesn't seek forgiveness for his treacherous deeds, with Jessica understanding the truth behind the betrayal. After reading this, it becomes evident to them that Yue harbored a deep disdain for the Harkonnens, even though he helped them. After all those dramatic events, Paul starts to experience a surge of heightened awareness, being able to process the information even faster than his Bene Gesserit mother. He finds himself inundated with a ceaseless stream of knowledge, a phenomenon he partially attributes to his mentat ability. But he feels that there is something else that amplifies this, the profound sense of purpose that consumes him ever since his encounter with Reverend Mother Mohiam. Jessica is optimistic about getting in contact with Dr. Kynes through Duncan Idaho, who could potentially secure their safety out in the desert. She's also keen on reuniting with any survivors from House Atreides following the Harkonnen assault. Paul, on the other hand, thinks that they must rely on themselves and the priority should be to secure the Atreides' atomic arsenal. With the Emperor's support in this attack, he sees slim chances for any survivors after the onslaught. Paul understands that the Fremen have struck a deal with the Guild to manipulate their surveillance satellites, ensuring that Fremen's activities on Dune go unnoticed. Meanwhile, Jessica is consumed by thoughts of her late husband and the unborn daughter she carries. Suddenly, through the radio, they receive news of the Harkonnen triumph in Arrakis, alongside the unsettling revelation that Sardaukar soldiers disguised as Atreides forces have plundered the Guild Bank. This is a meticulous scheme orchestrated by the Emperor and Baron Harkonnen, as they strategically turn the Guild against House Atreides, leaving any survivors stranded on Arrakis with no escape. Jessica finally finds out from Paul that Duke Leto never actually doubted her loyalty and that his father always regretted not marrying her. While Jessica mourns Leto, he struggles to connect with her grief. His thoughts are spinning as he encounters prescient visions, glimpsing myriad potential futures. During this, he grasps with the idea that the prescience could be the crucial ability utilized by the Guild navigators for interstellar travel. Paul becomes aware of the increased levels of spice that he breathes and eats, recognizing its influence on his ability. He foretells the birth of his sister, leaving Jessica shocked as she has kept her pregnancy secret. But even more shocking is the startling revelation that Jessica's father is Baron Harkonnen, a fact deliberately concealed by the secretive Bene Gesserit sisterhood. As he glimpses various potential futures, he envisions scenarios where the Fremen extends refuge to both him and Jessica, as he becomes their religious leader under the name Muad'Dib. While they are waiting in the still tent for Duncan Idaho to return, Paul continues to share his newly acquired cognitive ability with his mother. His thoughts race far beyond Jessica's comprehension as he emphasizes the pivotal role of the Fremen and their mastery of the desert in seizing control of spice production, a key element in overcoming the Harkonnens. Jessica struggles to keep up with his lines of thought, pondering whether her son might indeed be the Kwisatz Haderach. He grapples with the realization that he embodies the culmination of the Bene Gesserit breeding program. He can foresee the incoming jihad, wherein the remaining Atreides and Fremen warriors will spread war and destruction across the cosmos, but Paul is determined to prevent this holy war from happening. It's been a while since Duncan Idaho has left, and a sandstorm is sweeping over the tent, burying it beneath layers of sand. Concerned that Idaho might have been captured, Paul resolves that he and Jessica must find their own way through the desert. Under the cover of night, they excavate themselves out of the sand, and Paul leads the way, with Jessica instinctively trailing him. As they abandon their camp, they observe Harkonnen ornithopters scouting the area in the distant desert, when all of a sudden a thopter appears to acknowledge their presence. At dawn, Thufir Hawat finds refuge on the outskirts of Arrakis alongside a handful of surviving Atreides soldiers and a Fremen ally. The Harkonnens' assault has left him reeling with a mix of shock and rage, nearly eclipsing his usual calm and analytical mentat prowess. He is astonished by the sheer scale of the attack, with the 10 legions deployed by the Emperor and House Harkonnen, calculating the cost at around 50 years' worth of spice revenue. His thoughts remain consumed by suspicion toward Lady Jessica, whom he holds responsible for betraying House Atreides, driving him to seek vengeance. He talks with the Fremen, strategizing their escape from the clutches of the Harkonnen forces, and he discovers that Gurney Halleck and a small portion of the Atreides troops have found refuge among the smugglers. The Fremen mentions the pivotal decision of recovering the water from fallen Atreides soldiers, and also confirms Duke Leto's demise with Paul's fate being unknown. The Mentat is astonished about the Fremen's prowess in combat, as they have acquired a Harkonnen artillery weapon for examination, while also decimating the Sardaukar troops with minimal effort. An injured Atreides soldier takes his last breath, prompting the Fremen again to ask for permission to take his water, to which Hawat reluctantly agrees. The other soldiers are angry about this decision, but their discontent dissipates upon discovering that the Fremen pledge their unwavering support to their cause. Hawat becomes a first-hand witness of the remarkable combat prowess and discipline of the Fremen, as a select few overpower a Sardaukar-piloted ornithopter, killing everyone inside and stealing the craft. Later, a Fremen pilot deliberately crashes the stolen ornithopter into a Harkonnen troop carrier, resulting in a devastating explosion that takes out 300 enemy soldiers. As they prepare to change their position, the Mentat and his team find themselves ambushed by Sardaukar forces, leading to the demise of the soldiers, with Hawat being incapacitated and taken prisoner. The ornithopter that appears in the night sky, above Paul and Jessica, is piloted by Duncan Idaho, accompanied by Dr. Kynes and a group of Fremen. The duo is rescued and they observe the enemy ornithopters being obliterated by a massive subatomic blast, triggered by their lasguns hitting the shield buried by Duncan in the desert. Kynes leads the party to one of the old Imperial bases that he previously concealed from Duke Leto. It is now used by the Fremen for ecological experiments, trying to revive water reservoirs on Dune. When Idaho addresses him with sire, Paul remembers that following his father's demise, he is now the leader of House Atreides. Kynes experiences a brief moment of uncertainty regarding his commitment to assist Paul and Jessica, a decision that could potentially imperil himself and the Fremen. However, his doubts dissipate as he witnesses Paul's mature demeanor and newfound authority. His ambition to transform Arrakis into a habitable world further solidifies the planetologist's conviction to support him. Jessica and Paul also unveil Kynes' true identity. He is the enigmatic Fremen leader known as Liet, who appears to wield both political and religious authority among his people. He escorts both of them to private chambers within the cave, initiating a dialogue of negotiation, with Paul asserting his legal nobility, while Liet Kynes emphasizes his leadership within Arrakis. Seeking to steer the conversation toward practical matters, the ecologist probes him about his strategy to reclaim power from Emperor Shaddam IV and House Harkonnen. Paul aims to reveal the secret alliance between the Emperor's Sardaukar troops and House Harkonnen, leveraging the threat of disclosing the truth behind the attacks to the Landsraad High Council. This would lead to a civil war that the Emperor could not afford. Instead, Paul will propose to marry one of the princesses, thus ascending to the throne. He gambles on the Emperor's inclination to safeguard the Imperium by stepping down, instead of seeing the great houses go to war. Kynes and Jessica recognize the strengths and weaknesses of this strategy, but the ecologist finds himself won over by Paul's unwavering integrity after apologizing for the previous heated conversation. Paul goes as far as to pledge not only his allegiance but also his very life to Kynes, if the planetologist would do the same. Their discussion is abruptly interrupted when Sardaukar forces launch a sudden assault on their group within the confines of the Imperial base. In the heat of battle against the formidable Sardaukar forces, Duncan Idaho valiantly sacrifices himself to shield Paul, allowing the rest to escape through a concealed passage. Choosing to part ways temporarily, Kynes instructs them to press onward until they stumble upon an ornithopter, urging them to fly into a sandstorm to escape the chase. Despite its risks, he assures them that maintaining altitude within the storm is the key to survival. As he departs through another passage, Kynes pledges to send Fremen reinforcements to guide them to safety. Following his guidance, Paul and Jessica flee from the Imperial base, finding themselves chased by several thopters. Seeing the approaching sandstorm, Jessica places her faith in Paul's skills to keep them alive, and they go inside. The winds are relentless, but Paul skillfully steers the craft to a secure zone, only to discover that he has no control over the thopter. He notices his mother's dread and decides that the best course of action is to ride the storm. So he takes his hands off the controls, leaving themselves to the mercy of the desert. Baron Harkonnen receives news from the captain of the Harkonnen Guard that Jessica and Paul managed to evade the Sardaukar units by flying an ornithopter into a sandstorm. With wind speeds exceeding 800 kilometers per hour, the captain speculates that their survival is unlikely. He also discloses intel, suggesting that Dr. Kynes may have allied with House Atreides, leaving the Baron fuming over this treachery and orders the captain to catch the planetologist and kill him. Expressing concern about the potential ramifications of killing an Imperial scientist, the captain is instructed to make it look like an accident. Next, he reports the capture of Thufir Hawat, who remains convinced that Jessica betrayed the Atreides. Recognizing his exceptional talent, Baron Harkonnen sees value in retaining him, especially now that Piter is gone. He intends to exert control over the Mentat by administering a residual poison, withholding the antidote as leverage. The Baron dismisses his captain and contemplates his current state of affairs. He is quite pleased with how things are going, being sure that Paul and Jessica have died in the sandstorm. The eradication of the Atreides fills him with delight, and he envisions a continued ascent of House Harkonnen. He imagines a dynasty where one of his kin occupies the imperial throne, favoring his nephew Phaedrotha as a promising candidate for such a prestigious role. Meanwhile, he summons Rabban, another one of his nephews, granting him authority over the planet. He can do whatever he wants on Arrakis, but he must prioritize maximizing profits at all costs. They have spent huge amounts of money on the Sardaukar troops, as well as the expensive space travel for bringing the Harkonnen soldiers from Giedi Prime. Rabban wonders if they have underestimated the strength of the Fremen, suggesting that the Sardaukar perceive them as a genuine threat, pledging to return to Dune and eradicate them. In response, the Baron orders that the population must accept the fabricated narrative, portraying the invasion as a localized conflict and Duke Leto's demise as an unfortunate accident. He then dismisses his nephew, who remains unaware that the Baron intends to soon replace him with his younger brother, Phaedrotha. Amidst the raging sandstorm, Paul tries to get control over the ornithopter, calculating the path towards their survival. Aware of the peril facing both of them, he steers the craft towards a specific wind vortex, propelling them to safety. He lands the thopter into the sandy desert, and they hastily dash towards the safety of nearby rocks, aware that the noise of the landing will attract a sandworm. Inevitably, a colossal worm emerges, dwarfing even the largest guild spaceship, swallowing the ornithopter whole. They are struck by its immense size, finding solace in the fact that the Harkonnens will not find their trace. They are aware of the necessity to travel during the night and seek shelter during the scorching daylight. Navigating through the narrow passage in the rocky terrain proves to be quite challenging, with Jessica getting tired. Paul insists on moving forward until they encounter a cliff, beyond which lies nearly 4 kilometers of perilous open desert. Their challenge now lies in traversing without attracting the attention of any sandworms. Paul inquires about his mother's well-being, to which she assures him that her pregnancy is not holding back her physical abilities, but she proposes a pause to eat and rest before proceeding. In their strategy for traversing the open desert, they decide to activate a specialized device known as a thumper, strategically placed among the rocky terrain. The thumper emits a rhythmic clapping sound, luring sandworms towards it, effectively distracting them from their path. As the sandworms are unable to emerge through rocks, this will give them enough time to walk through the desert in the Fremen way, with irregular footsteps to emulate the ambient desert noises. Suddenly, Jessica gets buried in a sandslide, with Paul doing his best to remain calm and rescue his mother from the treacherous sands. He manages to save her, and despite losing their backpacks containing essential supplies, Jessica remains hopeful. With his mother's encouragement fueling his determination, Paul devises an innovative strategy to reclaim the lost packs. He creates a foam to stop the advance of the shifting sands, with Jessica excavating to find the buried supplies. Exhausted but determined to succeed, Jessica manages to rescue one of the backpacks just as she is about to be buried again under the advancing sands. Paul helps her to get out of the sand, and they have successfully recovered some supplies, crucial in keeping them alive. On the rocky surface, Paul begins to set up the tent, observing that someone else previously camped in that spot. Once the tent is up, he surveys the surroundings for any activity, suggesting to his mother the possibility of Fremen being nearby. Despite Liet Kynes' assurance of the Fremen support, Jessica wonders if they will be friendly. Her own experiences in the desert have enlightened her about the desperation for water and the lengths one might go to claim it. She contemplates the stark disparity between the barren landscapes of this desert world and planet Caladan. After the death of Esmar Tuek during the attack on Arrakis, his son, Staben, took his place as the leader of the smuggling operations. Gurney Halleck meets with him, seeking aid for himself, and the surviving 74 Atreides soldiers. The smuggler agrees to help them, but stipulates that Halleck must refrain from any hostile actions against the Harkonnens. Engaging in open conflict poses too great a risk for the smugglers, although he admits to harbor a deep-seated hatred for them. The two of them engage in a long discussion, with Halleck sharing that he leans towards suspecting Lady Jessica as the betrayer of House Atreides, influenced by the judgment of Thufir Hawat. Staben, on the other hand, holds a different perspective. He brings news of the Harkonnens' belief that Jessica and Paul have perished, along with the confirmation of Duke Leto's demise and Hawat's capture. The smuggler also surprises him with the news that Rabban is now the ruler of Arrakis, with Halleck disclosing his personal vendetta against him due to past injustices inflicted upon his family. The former war master of House Atreides contemplates aligning himself with the Fremen, but Staben persuades him to join the smugglers, as they are more civilized. He warns Halleck of the perils of joining the Fremen, painting a picture of a life constantly pursued by the Sardaukar, who are actively seeking to eradicate the Fremen. Eventually, he agrees to join the smugglers, offering them an increase in manpower, as well as giving his men a chance to work their way off this planet. Going back to tell his men the news, he discovers that one of the injured soldiers will die soon. At his request, Halleck plays his favorite melody on Bali set as he peacefully departs this world. As dusk approaches, Paul lingers near the tent in which his mother takes a nap, pondering the wisdom of venturing across the open desert. Upon waking up, Jessica catches sight of him, and she is struck by the resemblance to Duke Leto, evoking a wave of sorrow within her. She then steps out of the tent, and Paul remarks that despite its harshness, this place has its charm. They get ready to move on, strategically placing the thumper deep inside the rocky terrain. Beneath the shimmering stars, they start walking across the vast desert, with Jessica mimicking her son's movements, who remembers this from his prophetic visions. It is only midway through their journey that the distant rumble of sandworms echoes across the dunes, signaling their curious approach to the thumper. Nearly reaching safety, Paul steps on drum sand, triggering a loud sound. At that moment, they start running toward the rocky area, with a menacing sandworm in hot pursuit. Reaching safety, they find refuge within the rock formation, just as the colossal creature emerges from the sand, its jaws gaping as it seeks its prey. Paul is struck by its majestic presence and senses the smell of cinnamon coming from its mouth, once again wondering about the elusive connection between sandworms and spice. The sandworm extends its reach beyond the stones, yet its attention is abruptly diverted to the distant echo of another thumper. Paul asks himself if some Fremen triggered it to divert the sandworm away from them, or maybe for another reason, possibly something involving the hooks that he saw within the Fremen backpack. They move on, ascending a rocky cliff, and upon reaching the summit, they are astonished by the sight of an oasis, nestled in the rocky terrain, flourishing with desert plants. Among the shadows, running mice and a predatory bird adds to the lively scene. Out of nowhere, Paul and Jessica find themselves encircled by a group of Fremen. Paul is getting tense, but the Fremen caution against any movement, threatening to take their water and possibly even their lives. Under the scorching sun, Liet Kynes crawls across the vast expanse of the desert. He was captured by the Harkonnens and subsequently abandoned to the desert's merciless embrace, devoid of stillsuit or supplies. Heat-induced delirium grips him, draining his strength with each faltering step. Even in this state, he can detect the scent of the pre-spice mass lurking beneath the dunes, forewarning its imminent eruption. He begins to envision his father, Pardo Kynes, the first-ever planetologist of Arrakis. In this hallucination, his father imparts wisdom on transforming Dune into a green haven teeming with life and water, scolding his son for veering off course from his ecological endeavor to aid Paul Atreides. He also reminds him of his important mission of educating the Fremen community on their role in reshaping the environment of this planet. Liet Kynes reflects on the intricate activity unfolding at that moment beneath the desert's surface. Small creatures called sand trout, or little makers, feed the pre-spice mass with water and organic matter. The chemical reactions taking place lead to an increase in pressure through the production of huge amounts of carbon dioxide. Eventually, this gas builds to a critical level, triggering an explosive reaction that propels that substance on the surface. The high temperatures and the dry climate transforms that material over time into the highly desired spice. Again, he finds himself ensnared in a vivid vision in which his father continues to talk about the climate of Arrakis and how his son has carried his legacy forward. The process of pressure building that he has been reflecting on reaches its threshold and triggers a violent explosion that claims the life of the planetologist. Paul and his mother are surrounded by the Fremen, with Jessica drawing upon her Bene Gesserit teachings, understanding that they talk in Chicabsa, their native tongue. They are wondering if the duo might be the individuals they seek. Tempted to use the voice on their leader, she realizes that this is not her best course of action. The leader of the Fremen group is revealed to be Stilgar, the one who Paul encountered alongside Duncan Idaho during the meeting in Arrakis. He recognizes the bravery of Paul and Jessica for daring to journey across the open desert, but one of the Fremen, Jamies, insists that they should be killed and their water seized. Stilgar opts against ending Paul's life, swayed by Liet Kynes' orders to find the young Duke, and also because he believes that he might be the long-awaited Lisan al-Gaib, the savior of the Fremen. However, when it comes to Jessica, he thinks that eliminating her and taking her water is the best choice. Perceiving the imminent threat, she pretends to fall on the ground, and when Stilgar moves in to execute her with his blade, she swiftly disarms him and renders him helpless against the rocky terrain. Meanwhile, Paul swiftly ascends to the higher ground, neutralizing a Fremen who tries to block him. When the group tries to intervene, Stilgar halts their assault, acknowledging Jessica's combat prowess. He realizes that she is a Bene Gesserit, and alongside her unique fighting skills, she can be an important asset to the Fremen community. Seeing the troops approaching, he yells once more at them to retreat, cautioning a young girl named Chani, who is attempting to stealthily approach Paul. He decides to welcome the two of them into his community, in exchange for Jessica imparting her knowledge of the Weirding Way. She is skeptical, but Stilgar reassures her that in their culture, giving your word holds the weight of law, especially when spoken by a leader like himself. He reminds her that they all share the same disdain for the Harkonnens, and she ultimately agrees to his proposal. She is aware that not every member of Stilgar's group is fully on board with the idea of granting her and Paul refuge. She strategically leverages the deeply ingrained myths and prophecies of the Fremen, which were seeded by the Bene Gesserit ages ago, to assert their perceived divine status. This tactic both impresses and unsettles the Fremen, particularly upon realizing her own affiliation with the Sisterhood. With Jessica signaling safety, Paul cautiously comes out of his hiding place, only to come face to face with the Fremen girl. She aims a weapon at him, stating that she wouldn't have permitted him to harm her friends, and she introduces herself as Chani, daughter of Liet Kynes, leaving Paul astonished upon realizing that she's the mysterious girl he dreamed about on Caladan. She playfully volunteers to guide him down the rocks, teasing Paul for selecting the toughest route to ascend. With effortless elegance, she descends the rocks, while Paul silently appreciates the cover of darkness concealing his blush. Meeting the girl from his dreams leaves him in awe, as if she embodies a stroke of fate. As the group prepares to depart for Stilgar's siege, he gives them distinctive kerchiefs, ensuring they are identifiable as part of his community should they become lost. Additionally, he tasks Chani with the responsibility of watching over Paul, ensuring he stays out of trouble. While she enjoys teasing Paul, she takes her responsibility seriously to safeguard the group's security during their journey. They travel throughout the night, arriving at the cave as the light of dawn rises on the horizon. Navigating through a narrow passage, they maintain a sense of urgency, afraid of being detected by enemies. Upon reaching the shelter of a profound cavern, the group becomes more relaxed, with Chani playfully teasing Paul while offering him food that contains spice. Jessica catches sight of another cave opening and admires the splendor of the sunrise casting its glow. Stilgar shows her the Fremen in the distance working under a cliff, noting that they are his people, and indicating that their party aims to reach the Siege by nightfall. She acknowledges the remarkable discipline of the Fremen, and Stilgar explains that an integral part of their survival is to be led by the strongest among them. Jessica questions if she has inadvertently challenged his authority earlier, to which he clarifies that it wasn't an official challenge. His people are very interested in learning her unique combat technique, known as the Weirding Way. He also reveals that his people have been working too much in the heat of the day, trying to accumulate sufficient spice to pay the Spacing Guild. As part of the agreement, the Guild refrains from deploying satellites over desert regions where the Fremen are reshaping the climate of Arrakis. While it may take over 6 generations before witnessing the complete fruition of their efforts, the Fremen display an unwavering dedication to transform Dune into a more hospitable environment. They envision a world where individuals can roam freely without the necessity of stillsuits, fostering an ecosystem teeming with plants and accessible water sources on the surface. Stilgar asks Jessica if she entertains the idea of becoming his wife. Acknowledging her formidable skills, he foresees a future where she might be forced to contest his leadership, a customary tradition among the Fremen where the strongest leads the tribe. Their union would negate any power struggles, and it would remain devoid of physical intimacy. This is a deliberate choice to avert potential challenges from younger Fremen, who might perceive any deviation from his commitment to the community as a weakness. Jessica's admiration for him grows, and she understands that this would solidify her position among the Fremen. Observing his leadership, Jessica is impressed by his wisdom, pondering the ancestry that shaped such a remarkable individual. If she refuses to become his wife, he presents her with another alternative. With the current Reverend Mother being quite old, the second choice is to become their new Reverend Mother. Under the watchful gaze of Stilgar and his people, she senses an opportune moment to assert her identity as the foretold Reverend Mother. She allows a memory to come upon her, reciting ancient Fremen rituals familiar to those gathered around her. Paul finds himself captivated by the scene, immersed in his heightened senses due to the high amounts of spice in his food. With his prescience, he can see past, present, and future, but he's aware of the risks involved in getting lost in those visions. Even some seemingly insignificant actions can have consequences in the future, being able to foresee his own demise by the blade in a multitude of those paths. As dusk approaches, Jessica wakes up from her slumber, reflecting on her peaceful rest and recognizing the newfound tranquility in the presence of the Fremen. Casting her gaze across the cave, she spots Paul. She remembers his recent demeanor, speculating that the spice might be amplifying his prescience, leading him into uncharted territories of perception. Stilgar makes his entrance, catching Jessica's attention with his visible tension, shared by everyone in the cave. It comes to light that James has issued a challenge and wants to fight Paul in a duel. He wants to erase the humiliation of being disarmed by the young Duke, and he also believes that Paul and Jessica can't understand the values of the Fremen community, especially when it comes to the importance of water. It is evident that the entire Fremen group is displeased with Jaime's actions. Jessica tries to prevent the duel by giving him her water, but despite this, even with Stilgar being unhappy about it, Jaime still wants to fight. Paul steps forward, and despite the unsettling visions of his potential demise, he remains composed, confident in his ability to outmatch him once more. Chani shares insights into his combat style, highlighting a potential vulnerability, and then she gives him a crysknife. They strip down their stillsuits, and the duel begins, with both of them moving in a circle, waiting for the right moment to attack. They engage in combat, where Paul demonstrates superior prowess thanks to Gurney Halleck's teachings. Yet his offensive timing suffers due to his focus on training with a shield. Eventually, he strikes Jaime's knife hand, asking him to surrender, but the duel can end only one way. As fear begins to grip Jaime's, Paul remembers Duncan Idaho telling him to take his time and let the opponent's fear turn into terror. Jaime's makes a desperate move, lunging at Paul in an attempt to catch him off guard, but Chani's advice proves vital, allowing Paul to anticipate the threat. With a swift motion, he counterattacks with the crysknife, leaving the Fremen lifeless on the ground. Following this, some members of the group hasten to remove Jaime's body to retrieve its water, while Jessica approaches her son. It was the first time he had killed anyone, and she is determined to prevent him from finding pleasure in such victories. They realize that the Fremen misinterpret Paul's actions in the duel, thinking that he was sadistically toying with Jaime's. They are taken aback to discover that he has never taken a life before, and their perception shifts, now respecting his actions, and in a gesture of honor, Stilgar grants Paul the Fremen name Usul. Following Fremen tradition, Paul is called upon to select a name that all Fremen can openly address him by, and he chooses Paul Muad'Dib, inspired by the resilience of the desert mouse. He remains acutely aware of the perilous implications of his growing leadership, recalling the visions of the holy war fought in his name. During Jaime's funeral, according to Fremen tradition, Paul is offered his water, but he initially refuses it. However, after hearing his mother's arguments, he changes his mind. He realizes that rejecting the water could damage the bond between himself and the tribe. Stilgar calls forward Jaime's friends, and each one selects an item from his belongings as a tribute to him. Jessica also steps forward to honor the deceased and chooses a kerchief from the array. As Paul approaches the pile of items, he picks a bali set, perhaps remembering Gurney Halleck. He expresses regret for not having known Jaime's better, and his voice becomes choked with emotion as tears roll down his cheeks. The Fremen are moved by Paul's profound reverence, and they come forward to gently touch his moist cheeks. Jessica understands the significance of tears being a sacred offering for them. Following the ceremony, the ultimate act of the funeral tradition involves the transfer of Jaime's water to Paul. He is to safeguard it vigilantly and distribute it if necessity demands. Rather than directly receiving the water containers, Paul is given metal rings serving as water markers, with the liquid stored within the community's reservoirs. He gives Chani the rings to keep them safe, unaware at first that his gesture is considered a form of Fremen courtship. Once again, the tribe moves on, and they soon reach a cavern with towering ceilings and a sizable reservoir of water. With meticulous precision, Jaime's water is poured into the pool, aligning perfectly with the calculations made by the Fremen earlier. Jessica is impressed by their precision, and Stilgar explains the sanctity of this place, emphasizing that no Fremen would ever dare to drink from this pool. It is safeguarded from sandtrout, with countless similar sanctuaries established across Arrakis. Hearing this makes her think that rallying such devout followers to Paul's cause will not be a hard task after all. Watching the water-pouring ritual, Paul finds himself once again overwhelmed by the looming inevitability of the jihad. Even in the event of his death, fate will find resolution through his mother Jessica, or his yet unborn sister. He realizes that the only way to stop the impending wave of bloodshed would be for everyone within the confines of that cavern to die. Later, Chani asks Paul to play her a melody on the bali set, and he opts to sing one of Gurney Halleck's songs. Witnessing this scene, Jessica is taken aback by her son's choice of singing a love song to Chani, thinking about the potential risks of this relationship. After he's done with the music, Paul retreats into a corner, harboring conflicted thoughts about his mother's role in his destiny, blaming her for the holy war to come. On Giedi Prime, the entire planet celebrates the 17th anniversary of Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen. To mark the occasion, he kills his 100th slave gladiator in a grand spectacle within the public arena. Count Finring and his Bene Gesserit wife, Lady Margot Finring, are honored guests at this extravagant event. The stronghold city of Harko, freshly decorated with banners, gives the illusion of good spirits. As the two nobles walk through the city, talking in a different language for privacy, they realize that all of this is a facade. Upon arriving at the Harkonnen Keep, they are greeted by Baron Harkonnen, approaching them with the aid of the anti-gravity suspensors, supporting his considerable bulk. Wearing several rings on his fingers and an orange cloak, he is quite a sight. Feyd-Rautha joins his uncle, and Lady Finring notices his impressive physical condition. The Baron introduces his nephew, who is captivated by her serene demeanor and beauty. Seeing this, the Baron thinks to himself that his heir should rather focus on the Count, whom he regards as one of the most dangerous men alive. Feyd-Rautha disrupts the conversation with the bold claim of securing the victory in the arena to honor Lady Finring. As he confidently walks away to get ready for the fight, she wonders if he is indeed the individual she was instructed to monitor by the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother. After all, the bloodline of the Harkonnens holds significant importance for the genetic breeding program. The Baron leads his guests to a secluded spot, marked by soundproof barriers. Here, Count Finring voices his discontent with the decision to dismiss the Sardaukar troops from Dune after the fall of House Atreides. Moreover, the Emperor is eager for updates on the Harkonnens' management of the rebellious Fremen on the desert planet. In response, the Baron dismisses any worries about the Fremen and remarks that prolonging the presence of Sardaukar troops on Arrakis would have risked exposing the Emperor's secret support for the Harkonnens. The Count remains unconvinced, delivering the news that the Emperor wants a report on the finances, to which the host complies. They continue to discuss political matters, especially decisions regarding Duke Leto's former mentat, Thufir Hawat, whom Count Finring wants dead. The tension grows when the Baron learns that the Emperor plans to use the Sardaukar forces against House Harkonnen if the manipulation and deceit continues. Surprisingly, Vladimir Harkonnen envisions it as an opportunity to gain support from the great houses, thus creating the path for his nephew to become the new ruler of the Imperium. Yet he is shocked to find out that he might not have the authority to choose his successor if the Emperor refuses to grant official approval. They begin to walk towards the arena where Feyd-Rautha is ready for his fight. He strides into the fighting pit, holding a long blade in one hand, enjoying the cheering crowd around him. He dedicates this forthcoming battle to his uncle, who is unaware of the surprise to come. He secretly arranged with Hawat for one of the slaves not to be weakened by drugs, which will inevitably excite the audience with a thrilling fight. Should the tide turn in favor of the slave, the mentat will trigger the keyword implanted into his mind, leading to his paralysis. As the slave steps into the arena, some spectators swiftly realize that he is not drugged. He used his blood to draw the emblem of House Atreides on his clothes, hinting at his combat prowess. Despite initial concerns, Feyd-Rautha is confident in his skills to win this fight, especially since he has switched the blade with a poisoned one. The fight begins, and he uses his youthful swiftness to evade the slave's attacks, while the applause from the spectators fuel his excitement. Due to his arrogance, he gets into close combat with the slave who is stronger than him, prompting the mentat to paralyze his opponent just for a second, giving him enough time to use his poisoned blade. Instantly, the toxin takes effect, leaving the slave incapacitated, and rather than allowing the Harkonnen to claim victory, he chooses to end his own life with his blade. Though Feyd-Rautha is frustrated by this, he takes solace in the fact that the crowd is going wild. He also deliberately chooses to break the tradition by granting his fallen opponent an honorable burial instead of taking his head. The Baron is displeased by this, but his mood shifts when Lady Finring highlights the overwhelming approval of the crowd. Following this, Vladimir Harkonnen takes his leave, leaving the two guests to discuss the events. They are sure that the fight was arranged, suggesting the involvement of Thufir Hawat. They speculate that he might try to eliminate the Baron by raising his nephew to power. They enjoy this prospect, since Lady Finring can use her physical attractiveness to manipulate Phaedrotha. She must get pregnant with his child as she was instructed by the Bene Gesserit, ensuring the continuation of the Harkonnen bloodline. Even though the Count is quite jealous, he acknowledges the necessity of this decision. The couple also discusses the striking similarities and abilities between Phaedrotha and Paul Atreides, though their upbringing has led them down different paths. The Count wishes he could have prevented his demise on Arrakis, but Lady Finring recalls a saying from the Bene Gesserit, suggesting that death is not certain until one witnesses a lifeless body, and even then, appearances may deceive. Under the glow of the moonlight, Stilgar and his people travel stealthily towards their siege. Chani continues to share her knowledge with Paul, showing him how to adjust his hood to preserve moisture. Upon reaching their sanctuary, everyone casts off their hoods and remove the nose plugs, inhaling the fresh air. From the smell surrounding them, Jessica deduces that the Fremen uses the spice in the production of paper, plastics, and even explosives. Paul notices the absence of Chani, who vanished upon their arrival, and soon he receives the news that her father, Liet Kynes, is dead. The Fremen are gripped by sorrow and fury, recognizing it as the handiwork of the Harkonnens, despite their attempt to camouflage it as an accident. Guided by the group, Paul is led into a different cavern where he encounters a Fremen woman named Hara, Jaimi's wife. She is taken aback to discover that the youthful Paul was responsible for her husband's demise, leaving their children without a father. Filled with anger, her emotions shift as she hears whispers that he might be the long-awaited Lisan al-Gaib. Paul discovers that by defeating Jaimi's, he must assume guardianship over his sons and wife. Following the tradition, he chooses to claim Hara as his servant rather than his partner, pledging to offer her protection. To his astonishment, she harbors no ill feelings for her husband's death, appreciating the fairness of the duel and the tears shed at his funeral. Preparations are made for the tribe to abandon the siege, and Paul is amazed by the ingenious dew collector devices, which efficiently gather moisture for vegetation. The Sardaukar forces are on a relentless pursuit, but Hara assures him that the Emperor's soldiers will only discover hidden explosives. Moving along towards their residence, he observes several remarkable creations of the Fremen, including advanced food processing methods and stillsuit production machinery. Despite the imminent departure, the children are still participating in lessons focused on the ecology of Arrakis. He encounters skeptical looks from several Fremen on the path that leads them to their quarters. He rejects Hara's flirting, and he asks her for food instead. While waiting, his thoughts shift towards Chani's whereabouts and his mother Jessica, wondering how is she adjusting to Fremen culture. Suddenly, a sound from behind catches his attention, but instead of Hara bringing the food, he encounters two young boys, each one having a small crysknife. Seeing this, he recalls the tales about the fierce Fremen children. In a vast cavern, filled with over 10,000 Fremen gathered, Jessica sits next to Stilgar waiting for Paul. She contemplates the imminent trial, mindful of its potential impact on her unborn child. Yet she recognizes it as her only choice to ensure her acceptance and security within the Fremen community. Paul arrives at the site, flanked by two young boys holding their hands on their knives as if safeguarding their newfound leader. Chani also steps forward, wearing green to mourn her father, and behind her, a few Fremen women carrying their elderly reverend mother. Stilgar addresses the assembled group, stating that their journey to evade the relentless enemies scouring the desert is too much for the old woman, but there's hope for a successor if Jessica survives the agony, becoming a reverend mother herself. Chani presents her with the water of life, a highly concentrated dose of melange extracted from a small sandworm, killing it in the process. This is potentially a deadly ritual, with the water of life being poisonous to the body, but Jessica employs her Bene Gesserit skills to change its molecular structure, thus neutralizing its harmful effects. She feels like it sucks the life out of her, but at the same time, it enhances her perception, granting her an unprecedented awareness. She has effectively rendered the water of life harmless, and needs to demonstrate this to the Fremen. Chani takes a drop from her mouth and blends it with the remaining water of life, triggering a reaction that transforms the entire substance into a non-toxic liquid. Jessica realizes that her own consciousness is blending with that of the former Reverend Mother. The elderly woman imparts her life's wisdom to Jessica, while cautioning her about the impact this metamorphosis will have on her unborn child. She gains access to the collective memories of all previous Reverend Mothers, stretching back even beyond the Bene Gesserit order, a transformation that will extend to her daughter as well. With her new knowledge, she understands that the creatures known as Makers among the Fremen are none other than the sandworms. The altered water of life, now harmless, is distributed among the assembled Fremen for communal consumption. It appears that the substance affects the perception of everyone present, with both Paul and Chani experiencing visions of a future where they have a child. Paul also glimpses a grim conflict looming between his Fremen followers and the combined forces of the Emperor, the Harkonnens, the Spacing Guild, and the Bene Gesserit. Once more, he grapples with the internal conflict spurred by his foreknowledge of the religious war that threatens to engulf the Imperium. 2 years have passed. A slave boy dispatched for Baron Harkonnen's entertainment tries to end his life, using a poison needle cunningly concealed within his skin. The Baron storms into an antechamber, asking his guard captain about the whereabouts of Phaedrotha, suspecting him of orchestrating the assassination plot. He finds his nephew and confronts him, leading to the confirmation of his suspicions. The Baron questions him on why he chose to send a slave boy instead of doing it himself, to which Phaedrotha responds that he merely followed his uncle's teachings of delegating unpleasant tasks to others. In a bid to evade another attempt on his life, Baron Harkonnen suggests relinquishing his position as the head of House Harkonnen in the foreseeable future, paving the way for his nephew to assume his rightful place. The Baron also plans to assign his Mentat to keep a vigilant eye on him, but Phaedrotha is aware that Hawat is trying to create discord between the two of them, endangering the stability of House Harkonnen. During the meeting with Baron Harkonnen, Hawat wants to dispatch a message to Rabban on Dune, withholding the motives behind it. They speculate on a potential correlation between Dune and Seleucus Secundus, with the prison planet rumored to be the secret training ground for the Sardaukar forces. The Mentat reveals that a select few among Duke Leto's soldiers hone their abilities to a caliber capable of challenging even the Imperial troops. This perceived threat prompted the Emperor to ally with the Harkonnens to eradicate House Atreides. He also believes that due to the harsh conditions on Arrakis, the Fremen might even surpass the prowess of the Sardaukar in combat. Remembering his previous conversation with Count Fenring, Baron Harkonnen is shocked to hear there could be approximately 10 million Fremen residing on Dune, a figure significantly surpassing his previous population assessments. The Mentat suggests that it might be a good idea to transform Arrakis into a prison planet by leaving it under Rabban's oppressive rule for a while. This paves the way for the Baron or Phaedrotha to seize control later, gaining control over the Harkonnen soldiers hardened by the challenges of the planet. Concealed within this plan are Hawat's hopes that some of the Atreides forces have survived and are now thriving on Dune. In the last 2 years, Paul and Chani have become a couple and they have a son named Leto, named as a tribute to the legacy of Duke Leto. From spice consumption, Paul's mind is now able to transcend the bounds of reality, dreaming frequently about his family, especially his mother who has become increasingly concerned about his power over the Fremen. His sister Alia is now 2 years old, and despite her tender age, she exudes a maturity beyond her years, walking and talking like an adult. This awareness stems from Jessica's ingestion of the water of life during pregnancy. Just like her mother, she has unlocked the reservoir of ancestral Bene Gesserit memories, granting her uncommon wisdom. Her exceptional nature has made her a source of unease among many Fremen who find her peculiar and detached from their traditional ways. As Paul wakes up from his dream, he senses the weight of the impending challenge awaiting him that day. In the last 2 years, he has ascended to a leadership position in both religious and political sense, and he even has his personal guard of elite warriors known as Fedaykin. But despite his status, Paul remains subject to Fremen tradition, and today he must prove that he is able to ride a sandworm. A Fremen friend has graciously loaned Paul a pair of maker hooks, and Stilgar gives him the last tips on how to ride the colossal creature. The first step is to call the sandworm towards him, and Stilgar provides him with a thumper, which Paul plants into the desert sand. Patiently, he awaits the arrival of the worm, and soon enough, he recognizes the unmistakable signs of its approach. Within the secure confines of the siege, Jessica reflects on Paul's trial. As dusk settles, she prepares for her duties as a reverend mother, attending to a newborn. She has integrated smoothly into Fremen society, yet the desert will always remain somewhat foreign to her. Over time, the tribe has embraced Jessica fully, treating her with a blend of reverence, affection, but also fear. Alia, accompanied by Hara, walks into Jessica's quarters, with the Fremen looking quite distressed. She tells the Reverend Mother that Alia has been stirring up trouble in the community by going to newborns and touching their foreheads. Those kinds of gestures only fuel the speculations circulating about her true nature, being compared with a demon or some other unearthly entity. Despite this, it is apparent that Hara harbors a deep concern for Alia and understands the hardships she faces as an outsider. She then tells Jessica that she stayed this long with Paul to ensure her sons receive specialized training due to his influential status, but she has now decided to marry Stilgar, becoming one of his wives. This makes Jessica reflect on Paul's relationship with Chani, whom she loves, but as a nobleman, he should secure a political marriage. Hara suggests that Chani desires what's best for Paul, even if it means marrying a more influential woman. One of Stilgar's wives enters the room, expressing her worries that once Paul passes the test of riding a sandworm, he will challenge her husband for the leadership of the tribe. This challenge appears almost certain, given the growing number of young Fremen rallying for it, yet the rest of the tribe acknowledges the importance of keeping Stilgar alive. Out in the desert, Paul successfully manages to ride the sandworm summoned by the Thumper. After a short solo ride, he is joined by numerous fellow Fremen who also hook themselves onto the worm. Paul wants to ride south towards the new siege, where Fremen women and children find refuge, but Stilgar wants to stop and set up camp for the night. They both acknowledge the growing anticipation among the Fremen for Paul to challenge for the leadership, recognizing his exceptional abilities. As they discuss the next strategic moves for the tribe, their attention is caught by the distant hum of a smuggler's ornithopter traversing the skies. Swiftly, the Fremen descend from the sandworm and hide. Paul wants to teach the smugglers a lesson for trespassing into Fremen territory, thus with Stilgar's assistance, they prepare a trap for the incoming smugglers. They successfully trap the smugglers, and turns out that the leader of this party is Paul's childhood mentor, Gurney Halleck. He is astonished to see Paul alive, whom he believed dead all those years since the Harkonnen assault, and even more so, he discovers that he is the mysterious Fremen leader. Pledging his allegiance to his rightful duke, he joins forces with him to overthrow the Harkonnens. Halleck and the smugglers join them as they venture into a cavern, but some of the smugglers are disguised Sardaukar agents, initiating a surprise assault. Even so, the Fremen swiftly outmatch them, eliminating the majority of them, with the rest being taken prisoners. Paul orchestrates the release of the Sardaukar prisoners, intending for them to report back to the Emperor news about him and the combat prowess of the Fremen warriors. Additionally, he assures Stilgar that he has no intention of eliminating him to seize leadership. He is too valuable to be killed. Addressing Stilgar and the Fremen, Paul declares his decision not to engage in combat. Instead, he reveals his ducal ring passed down from Leto, and he proclaims himself the new Duke of Arrakis. He proceeds to honor Stilgar by knighting him, thus becoming his trusted advisor, and persuades the Fremen to accept this. On top of the political title of Duke, Paul finally embraces his destiny as their religious figure. He just received news that Baron Harkonnen is retracting his support for Rabban, so now they can engage their enemies without worrying about military aid from outside. Paul rallies the Fremen to prepare for a campaign to seize control of Dune, emphasizing that Stilgar remains the leader of the tribe and acts on his behalf. Gurney Halleck is taken aback to discover that Lady Jessica is not only alive, but also residing within the Siege. He still believes that she is the one to blame for the betrayal of House Atreides. Once they arrive there, Halleck tries to kill Jessica in her quarters, and when Paul enters the room, he finds him with a knife at her throat. In a heartfelt speech, Paul defends his mother's integrity and her affection for Duke Leto, swaying Halleck to drop his blade. Moved by the profound love for both her and his father, Jessica is deeply touched. She admits her perceived failure in guiding him and encourages him to forge his own path toward genuine happiness, going so far as to advise him to marry Chani if he wants to. Halleck abruptly interrupts the emotional moment, deeply shaken and burdened with shame for harboring a falsehood about Jessica for over 2 years. He is overwhelmed by a sense of failure, and he urges Paul to kill him for his mistake. Yet Paul refuses to entertain such foolishness. Jessica too declines his plea, extending forgiveness and affection instead. They ask him to grace them with a song on his recently acquired Bali set, with Paul leaving him to entertain Jessica in her quarters as he tends to his duties. One of the guards brings news of numerous Fremen chieftains gathering for a council meeting. Instead of tending to his duties, Paul ventures into the depths of a cavern. He has decided that it is time to finally determine if he is indeed the prophesied Kwisatz Haderach, planning to consume the poisonous water of life, a trial that no man has ever survived. 3 weeks have gone by since Paul decided to drink the water of life alone. Chani receives a summon from Jessica to come north, only to discover upon arrival that Paul has been unconscious for the last 3 weeks. Jessica tried everything to wake him up, but his condition remained unchanged. Among the Fremen, some fear that Paul is beyond reach, while others perceive his state as a sacred trance in preparation for the impending battle. In a sudden revelation, Chani realizes that Paul has consumed the water of life, urging Jessica to bring the liquid. Applying some of it on Paul's lips, his mother watches in astonishment as her son inhales deeply. Chani asks the Reverend Mother to use her skills to transmute some water of life, but Paul wakes up before she can act. He believes he's been unconscious for mere moments, until Chani and Jessica reveal it was actually 3 weeks. Feeling drained from the experience, he takes pride in his survival, and to demonstrate his newfound abilities, he bravely drinks a significant portion of water of life. Jessica is shocked to see this and tries to stop him, but he grabs her hand and links his consciousness with her. Merging her awareness with her son is not as gentle as bonding with Alia or the old Reverend Mother, but despite this, a connection is forged. Paul wants his mother to reveal the obscure abyss from within, the realm that all Reverend Mothers can sense but cannot access. After a short while, Jessica is exhausted, and she leans on Chani for support as she settles into her seat. Paul explains to both of them everything, positioned at the pivotal point of exchanging and absorbing the valuable energies of both masculinity and femininity, transcending the confines of spatial and temporal boundaries. He embodies the Kwisatz Haderach of the Bene Gesserit, and he has surveyed not only the past and future, but also the present, seeing the threat looming over Arrakis. His visions reveal an entire fleet of guild spaceships, alongside 5 legions of Sardaukar, Baron Harkonnen, and even the Emperor himself. Additionally, emissaries from each of the great houses are also present, ready to launch an assault on the planet. Jessica learns from Paul that the Spacing Guild tries to prevent a war. They are leveraging the threat to leave any party stranding on Dune, as their primary interest is to safeguard spice production, pivotal for maintaining their exclusive control over interstellar travel. Paul also reveals his alarming strategy of fabricating a weapon from the water of life, aiming to trigger a sequence of events that would eradicate the spice on the planet. This would involve annihilating the sand trout and sandworms, upon which spice production relies. Chaney is shocked by his plan, considering it sacrilegious, but he intends to use this threat against his enemies. Despite the warnings from the Spacing Guild, Emperor Shaddam IV, accompanied by Baron Harkonnen and the 5 legions of Sardaukar, landed on Arrakis. Paul, Gurney Halleck, and Stilgar are scouting them as they establish their camp behind the protective barrier of the shield wall. Stilgar fears that the enemy might spot them, yet Paul confidently relies on the surplus of ornithopters at their disposal should they get attacked. Additionally, a huge sandstorm is on its way, a natural ally that aligns with the Fremen's combat tactics. Paul strategizes to harness its force in a bold offensive, intending to launch atomics to breach the shield wall. Following that, the Fremen will exploit the chaos by targeting the vulnerable fronts of enemy spacecraft, rendering them incapable of flight, and then engage the Sardaukar forces. He receives word from a messenger that the rocket launchers and projectile weapons are ready for battle. He also reports that the Sardaukar previously captured has been released and sent back to the Emperor. Paul sees the opportunity to reveal his true identity, hoping it will prompt the Emperor to rally behind the Atreides banner, thus allowing the Fremen warriors to fight only against the Harkonnens. However, the Emperor opts not to acknowledge Paul as the heir to House Atreides. Despite their plan, Halleck and Stilgar are still concerned over the presence of the Guild and the Landsraad fleet above Arrakis. But Paul, on the other hand, understands that they are extremely reluctant to engage in combat using their atomics due to his power to destroy the spice forever. The sandstorm sweeps in, prompting Gurney Halleck to launch the atomics, shattering the shield wall. In sync with the plan, the Fremen unleash intense firepower on the approaching spaceships. As Paul and his troops brace for the impending clash with the Sardaukar, a fragmented transmission arrives from the siege where Fremen women and children seek refuge. Tragically, it reports a Sardaukar raid, resulting in heavy casualties, including the loss of Leto. Alia has been taken captive, but there's no mention of Jessica and Chaney's fate in the message. In one of the Imperial ships, the Emperor interrogates Vladimir Harkonnen with the guidance of his Bene Gesserit truthsayer, Reverend Mother Mohiam. Also on his side are 2 representatives of the Spacing Guild, and his daughter, Princess Irulan, who is beautiful and quite talented in the ways of the Bene Gesserit. The presence of the Reverend Mother indicates the importance of this meeting, leaving the Baron uneasy about the future of his house. The Emperor seeks clarity on the disappearance of Thufir Hawat, the locations of the Harkonnen siblings Rabban and Phaedrotha, and any insights into the enigmatic Fremen leader known as Muad'Dib. Baron Harkonnen discloses that Hawat has vanished for 5 days, since embarking on a mission to infiltrate the smuggling network in Arrakis. He believes that the Mentat is going to die soon, as he requires the essential daily antidote to counteract the lingering effects of the poison they have infused within him. Also, his nephews are diligently patrolling the surrounding areas, ensuring security. When it comes to the Fremen leader, he maintains his previous arguments, dismissing any notion of significant activity within the southern desert regions of Arrakis. The Emperor orders for Alia Atreides to be brought in, and he expresses his disappointment with the Sardaukar raid on the siege. He blames the Baron for deceiving him regarding the true extent of the Fremen's military strength and numbers. The Emperor's fury intensifies upon discovering that only a handful of his elite Sardaukar soldiers managed to evade the fierce resistance put up by Fremen women, children, and the elderly. In a stunning display of poise beyond her tender years, Alia captivates the room by confidently asserting her identity as the offspring of Duke Leto and Lady Jessica. She fearlessly approaches Baron Harkonnen, daringly addressing him with pointed words about his physical condition, leaving him speechless. Not stopping there, she proceeds to mock the esteemed figures present in the room, defying the Emperor's commands and casually calling him by his name. In the midst of it all, Reverend Mother Mohiam is deeply troubled by this, realizing that Alia was born with the ancestral memories of the Bene Gesserit. She insists that the girl must die, believing that Alia is what the sisterhood terms an abomination. The Fremen attack causes chaos as they breach the shield wall, and amidst the turmoil, Alia pretends to be afraid just to be able to get close to the Baron. She is fully aware that he is her grandfather, but she kills him by using the Atreides Gom Jabbar. She then slips away from the Imperial forces by running into the swirling dust of the sandstorm. The Emperor finds himself astounded as the Fremen manage to disable his spacecraft, and even more astonishing is the sight of Fremen warriors charging into battle against Imperial forces on top of sandworms. He seeks refuge within a damaged ship alongside Princess Irulan, Reverend Mother Mohiam, the two guildsmen, and some Sardaukar guards. Count Fenring is summoned to join them, and after witnessing the unfolding battle outside, where the Fremen demonstrate superiority, they realize that treachery is their only path to victory. Gurney Halleck and Stilgar believe that sitting on the throne could be dangerous, but Paul assumes his rightful position as the ruler of Arrakeen, wanting to send a symbolic message. Paul requests Halleck's assistance in bringing Jessica and Chani to him, aware that Chani has already received the news of their son's demise. Just as he managed to suppress his sorrow following the death of his father, he now sets aside his grief the same way. Contemplating the day's events, he reflects on Alia's ability, allowing her to implant a message into his mind. In this message, she informs her brother that she took care of the Baron, and when Stilgar returns with news of discovering his body, he is shocked to hear that Paul already knew. Sending a Sardaukar prisoner to send a message to the Emperor, Paul wants to negotiate the terms of surrender and ensures his safety as long as everyone comes unarmed. Stilgar reports that Rabban was found dead, and Chani needs some more time alone to reflect on this sorrowful experience. Jessica wants a private meeting in the conservatory with her son, only to be taken aback by the profound transformation she observes in him. She wonders if this is from the loss of his son Leto, but Paul reveals that he has lived billions of lives, exploring unimaginable extremes of cruelty and compassion. The meeting with the Emperor is about to begin, and he wants his mother by his side during the negotiations. She cautions him about repeating his father's mistakes, but he calmly asserts that the princess is the key to securing the throne and nothing more. And just then, Chani arrives, her sorrow evident in her demeanor, with her eyes full of tears. Paul is visibly moved by her grief, promising her more children in the future. Stilgar signals that the Emperor and his entourage are on their way, with Gurney Halleck observing that Phaedrotha is also with them, but Paul doesn't look worried about him. Halleck also reports that the Spacing Guild has contacted them, making demands. Jessica is surprised by Paul's nonchalant attitude towards them. That's because Paul knows that his power to destroy the spice grants him significant leverage. As the Imperial party approaches, Paul notices they look quite messy, but not the Emperor. Even in those circumstances, he still emanates an aura, demanding respect. As they approach the throne, the Fremen guards halt their advance, and Paul notices the piercing gaze of Reverend Mother Mohiam. Even though he can see everything through his prescience, he spots a stranger, a man who never appeared in his visions. He learns from Jessica that he's Count Finring, who lived in Arrakis before House Atreides. His attention is then captivated by Princess Irulan, her fearlessness shining through her beauty. Thufir Hawat emerges from the rear of the Imperial group. His appearance is weathered and frail, yet Paul greets him warmly. Approaching Lady Jessica, the Mentat expresses regret, acknowledging his mistake towards her, a revelation brought forth by Gurney Halleck. Secretly, the Emperor has ordered the Mentat to kill his former student with a poison needle, and he is startled to find out that Paul is aware of the assassination plot. He extends his hand to help Hawat stay on his feet, his strength drained by the poison inflicted by the Harkonnens. With his remaining energy, he confronts the Emperor, showcasing the needle given to him, and he reaffirms his unwavering loyalty to House Atreides before he falls lifeless into Paul's embrace. His body is carried away by the Fremen, while Paul witnesses a flicker of dread in the eyes of the Emperor. Despite this, he attempts to assert his authority over Paul, laying blame for the conflict at his feet and threatening that the Spacing Guild and the Great Houses are on his side. Disregarding his nonsensical talk, Paul shifts his focus toward the two guildsmen, reminding them of his power to destroy the spice. Initially, they try to resist his authority and they call him insane, but through their limited prescience, they know that he might indeed carry out his warning. Paul then turns to Reverend Mother Mohiam, whom he has not seen since his Gom Jabbar trial. She finally accepts that he is the one, expressing forgiveness towards Jessica for not trusting her decision of giving birth to a boy. But despite centuries of genetic manipulation to create the Kwisatz Haderach, now that he is here, Paul reveals that he has no intention to affiliate himself with the Bene Gesserit, leaving Mohiam in disbelief. Turning his attention towards Princess Irulan, he talks to her politely, hinting at a clear solution to all this violence. She already knows what he has in mind, and accepts to marry him even though the Emperor opposes the idea. As Reverend Mother Mohiam tries to sway him to allow this marriage, Paul has a conversation with Chani, assuring her that he loves her and that his marriage with Irulan is going to be only for political reasons. Feyd-Rautha plays his last card, invoking the Conley, an ancient tradition where two houses resolve their dispute in a single combat duel. Paul accepts the challenge, leaving his followers puzzled by his decision to take such a risk. As the surroundings are prepared for the impending duel, Paul reflects on the significance of this moment, recognizing it as a pivotal juncture in time. He turns to Feyd-Rautha, addressing him with cousin, which leaves Mohiam shocked that Paul is aware of his maternal lineage. She dreads this confrontation between the two finished products of the Bene Gesserit, engaging in a fight to the death. As they begin to circle one another, Feyd-Rautha exudes supreme confidence, both in his verbal taunts and knife strikes. Paul, however, remains vigilant, contemplating whether his seemingly vulnerable left side might be a bluff. The suspicions are soon confirmed, as it turns out to be a double deception, with the hidden danger coming from the opposite to where Feyd-Rautha tries to lead him. He tries to cheat as usual by using a poisoned blade that he got from the Emperor, but Paul eventually gains the upper hand, allowing him to deal the fatal blow. Upon witnessing Paul's victory over the Harkonnen, the Emperor turns to Count Finring to eliminate him while he is weakened from the duel. When the Count and Paul exchange a glance, Paul realizes the reason behind his absence from his visions. His ancestry almost allowed him to become a Kwisatz Haderach, but he suffers from a genetic anomaly, lacking reproductive organs. Instead, he channeled his considerable abilities into a secretive existence. In a moment of connection between the two of them, Finring senses Paul's profound respect, prompting him to turn towards the Emperor and, for the first time in his life, to refuse his orders. With no other obstacle in his way, Paul starts to lay out his terms. In addition to permitting his union with Princess Irulan, Shaddam IV must officially step down from the throne and move back to Seleucia Secundus. Contemplating on his journey to become the new emperor, Paul foresees that the Fremen will eventually transform Dune into a paradise. Even with the immense power that he now has, he still acknowledges his inability to stop the impending jihad, destined to sweep across the universe.